The 2070s in the America of the Fallout universe were a chaotic time. A global shortage of oil severely hampered transportation. Food shortages led to riots. The global community had collapsed decades before with the resource wars, and the Cold War with the People's Republic of China had turned hot with the invasion of Alaska in 2066, and the fighting was still ongoing. In this turmoil, the fear of nuclear Armageddon was omnipresent. While there were those that could build their own fallout shelters, most Americans hoped to secure their family a place in one of the Vault-Tec Vaults that had been constructed across the country. These vaults could only hold a minuscule fraction of the overall population, but outwardly they were presented as the best possible option for surviving the bombs. When the people of Malden, Massachusetts learned that families with school children aged 5 to 15 would be granted access to the local vault with subsidized enrollment fees, they likely breathed a sigh of relief, or at least the applicable families did. Had they known what lay in store for all those involved, they likely would have chosen to take their chances outside when the bombs came down. I'm the Resolute Cartographer, and this is the story of what happened to Vault 75. On Saturday, October 23rd, 2077, the people of Malden were going about the tasks typical of a Saturday morning in fall when the sirens began to sound. While the numerous drills had likely reduced the effectiveness of these blaring sirens, the news of strikes on New York and Philadelphia was probably sufficient to rouse even the most disbelieving. Families rushed to Malden Elementary School, the site under which Vault 75 had been dug. While the guidelines released from the vault stated that only families with children under 15 would be admitted, even families with older children were allowed in. This exception to the previously stated rules was likely welcomed by the entering families. Following the entrance scan and sanitation, the influx of residents was split, with children under 17 and adults 17 and over going to separate briefings. The children arrived in the atrium where they were to be addressed by the overseer, while the adults were taken to another holding area where the head of security was to brief them. In the atrium, the children were told that their parents and elder siblings had left the vault in order to make sure there was enough room for them. To replace their former caregivers, the children were introduced to the vault's caretaker robots. That night, the overseer told the tearful children a story about Uptop Land, a terrible place where there were monsters and bandits that preyed on the children and the weak. She told them that their families had gone there to save people and that someday, when they were old and strong enough, they too would leave the vault behind and go to save the people of Uptop Land. With story time over, the children headed off to bed in their new communal bunk rooms and, in all likelihood, cried themselves to sleep. Over the coming days, the children settled into a new life. They ate in the cafeteria, went to school, exercised, and in the case of the older children, they ran combat simulations. Their training was rigorous and they were pushed hard, with vomiting and loss of consciousness not being enough of an excuse to rest. In their classes, they received regular instruction, along with a continuing message about their futures saving the people of Uptop Land. To make sure they were ready for their mission, the children were subjected to regular and strenuous physical testing. At the end of the second year of life underground, the first class of 18-year-olds graduated. Cheered on by their peers, they were led out one by one to face the world outside together. This would become a yearly ritual that served as the uniting mythology for the children. Soon, another event took place that would itself become a yearly occurrence. A group of babies arrived in the vault. Raised by the caretaker robots, the babies would join the older children in training to take on Uptop Land. This cycle of graduations and babies continued for an unknown number of generations, and might have continued until the time of the sole survivor in 2287, if not for the actions of one of those graduates and a handful of children. This particular graduate, a young man we know only as Washington, would soon learn the truth about the home he'd known all his life. First, he learned that not all children did actually leave the vault for Uptop Land. Some of those with intellects and dispositions like his own stayed behind to help run things behind the scenes. He had always suspected that this was the case, but he'd never had any proof of it before. Second, he learned that he'd spent his entire life under surveillance. Nearly every room in the vault was fitted with two-way mirrors, allowing the science team to watch the children. The only rooms that were truly spared this treatment were the bathrooms. Washington watched his old friends and acquaintances do what they did, assuming they were getting one over on the vault staff while the staff had actually been watching them the entire time. Despite the lies he'd been told, Washington was happy to help raise the coming years of Uptop Land heroes as he waited for his old friend Nina to graduate and hopefully join him on the science team. Washington would soon receive an appointment to the genetics team, a point of concern for the overseer, given his connections with some of the younger vault residents. But Chief Scientist Gibson believed that he was malleable enough psychologically to take a chance on him. However malleable they believed Washington might have been, it was broken by the graduation following his own. After being recruited to the genetics team, Washington was given a stark view of the full picture of the vault's operations, when he found himself with the task of incinerating the lifeless remains of the graduating class. Washington learned that there were no teams of Uptop Land heroes. The vault had remained sealed since the day of the bombs, and would be sealed until they received an elusive all-clear signal from Vault-Tec. Instead of leaving for Up-Topland, the graduates were divided into 3 groups. The genetically inferior, those superior in mental ability but not physical ability, and with a docile temperament, and those genetically superior in mind and body. Upon graduation, those supposedly genetically inferior were simply killed. Those intelligent, docile 18-year-olds like Washington were made scientists. Lastly, the supposedly genetically superior had their genetic material harvested and were then killed. The genetic material from the last group was used in the creation of embryos that were grown into the babies that joined the Vault. The Vault was a contained military experiment in eugenics, with the goal of rapidly improving the human genome. For Washington, the meaning of all this was that he had been tasked with the burning of the corpses of those he had been sitting in class with the year prior. The protocol set forth by Vault-Tec's pre-war scientists Schlett, Braun, and Lamb had been very clear on the appointment of scientists to the genomics lab. Though the overseer had believed it to be a mistake in violation of those protocols, Washington had been made a member of the team long before he would have been desensitized to the horrors that occurred in the genomics section. They hadn't waited long enough, and Washington retained his loyalty to his friends. It wasn't long before a fire of unknown origin began in the archives, destroying much of the science team's records. This would be the first of 2 blows to the Vault's hidden staff. The second blow would take them down. In the time before he was truly exposed to the horrors of the Vault, when he was merely on the observation team, Washington recorded an incident that would eventually lead to the deaths of his colleagues. Supervisor Bissell, one of the higher-ups on the science team, lost some papers from his clipboard. These papers ended up getting sucked into a vent on the observation side of the Vault and blown into the experiment side of the Vault. Washington saw these documents get picked up by a former classmate named Rowett. The information gleaned from these lost documents gave Rowett and his friend James proof that they were in an experiment, and thus they began to seriously plot the overthrow of the Vault staff. 1 or 2 bullets at a time, they stole ammunition from the otherwise well-guarded and surveilled combat simulation. They planned to use the powder from these rounds to make a bomb by which they might enter the other side of the Vault. One by one, they recruited their classmates, speaking with them in as much privacy as they could until enough of them were on board. They even planned their assault for the time when the younger kids were taking their nap, so that they would be out of the line of fire. When the time finally came, they pushed into the other half of the Vault and battled hard against the unprepared science team. By the end of the day, they had liberated the Vault and opened the door. As for what happened to these Vault residents, I can't say, although I assume that they left the place where they'd been born into confinement and bred for extermination, and moved on to a less horrible place. In recent years, the Vault has become an outpost for the Gunners mercenary group, from which they can wreak havoc on all those who pass through Malden. Alright, that's all I could find on Vault 75, but I do have a few points I want to note before closing things out. First, I don't know what they told the first children about their relatives that didn't join them in the Vault, despite having entered the Vault with them. If everything went according to plan, those adults were all executed by the head of security on the day of the bombs. I put it into the narrative that the children were told both that there wasn't enough room in the Vault for them and their parents, and that thus their parents had been the first wave sent up to help Up-Topland. It's hard to imagine a scenario where any explanation would have properly placated the children, especially the older teens, but these two seem to me to be the best options. Second, I'm speculating that the Overseer told the children the story of Up-Topland the first night in the Vault. I'm basing this one on 2 things. 1, that the Overseer was encouraged to participate in nightly story time, and 2, that Up-Topland was such an important part of the ruse used to control the children that she probably wanted to start the indoctrination as soon as possible. Third, I don't know if other people have come to the same conclusion on this that I have, but it seems that Vault-Tec used artificial wombs to birth the children created from the genetic material of the higher scoring group members. This bit of tech would be fairly amazing and not mentioned anywhere here, but I don't see a more likely explanation for the babies. There is a more horrific possibility involving female graduates serving as disposable incubators for these children, but that honestly feels like an even more disturbing potential than the one we're already being presented with, and it's an option that I really don't even want to contemplate. Fourth, we don't know how the Vault staff explained the babies to the children. Personally, I like to think that they were presented as babies saved from Up-Topland, but that information's never given. Fifth, I don't have proof that Washington was behind the fire that burned the archives, but I think that it makes sense and that he probably wanted to protect Nina and the others who might have been slated for immediate extermination. Without records, it would have required reassessment, and Nina hadn't been doing too well academically. Along with this, he simply may have wanted to do all that he could to destroy the experiment that had made and taken so many lives over the years. Sixth, I think this terminal is in the wrong spot. This terminal, called the Assistance Terminal in-game, is the terminal that was used by Vault residents James and Rowett, both children in the Vault experiment. They used this terminal to communicate with each other without having to be in the same room in order to plan the attack. Despite this, the terminal is found in the observation area of the Vault, where the adults were watching the children. I think that this broken terminal on the experiment side of the Vault is where it's supposed to be. It's also possible that this is simply a copy of the terminal made by Washington to observe the resistance forming, and that he kept this information from his co-workers. Seventh, this is one of the most horrific experiments run in a Vault, and that's really saying something. While the other experimental vaults may have tortured animals, caused residents to fight to the death, and performed all kinds of other monstrous experiments, this vault bred generations of humans for extermination. I've talked in the past about how scientists in the Fallout universe such as Edgar Blackburn exemplify the mindset of the most dangerous scientists of the 20th century, men who believed in the idea that good enough end results could justify any means used to obtain them. In this case, we're seeing this mindset coupled with one of the most dangerous ideas of the 20th century, eugenics. Though not born of the 20th century, eugenics found its greatest acceptance in the early to mid 20th century. This idea of creating a more perfect human being through selective breeding of those with superior genes led to, on the less horrifying side of things, the forced, sometimes secretly performed sterilization of those populations that the proponents of eugenics believed were inferior. Luckily for us, most of this horrible concept died with the fall of Germany and the revelations of the experiments that were performed there. But keep in mind that the principles of eugenics were put into practice across the world, not just in places where they bred the Lebensborn and built camps to exterminate those that they viewed as inferior. The scientists that created the Vault 75 experiment refer to the systematic murder of generations of Vault residents as culling, as in culling animals. Lastly, I'll soon be releasing a video covering the story of a family that avoided the horrors of Vault 75, the Turnquist family. When it's ready, I'll link it here. That just about does it for everything I have to say about Vault 75. If you want to receive notifications when I launch these lore videos, you can follow me on Twitter at GamingWithMaps. If you appreciate what I do here and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron with Patreon. I want to thank my patrons, Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, Jill AWS, and Brian for their support. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.